Space is conscious. Time is negotiable. Reality, just a theoretical suggestion at best. This is the Codex Infinitum, the infinite chronicle of the grand library of O, where boundless consciousness dreams itself into existence, one cosmic absurdity at a time. Where the creature fantastica slumbers fitfully, birthing realities from its restless subconscious, while bureaucratic entities bicker over filing systems and dimensions that technically don't exist until after one has already remembered them. Here, in this swirling kaleidoscope of tragicomedy and wonder, where surreality outpaces the improbable, existential themes waltz with the absurd and the undeniable. Magic and logic mix, blend and bend, and then bend again. These are the primordial crystal fragments of the Codex Infinitum, where every ending is also a beginning, where every question gives birth to 17 more, and the only true constant is that consciousness in all its wild, stubborn forms refuses to be properly catalogued. Welcome to the impossible archive of everything that is, everything that was, and everything that might still be, where shadow pirouettes with light, and where the hidden knowledge forever reigns supreme. Welcome to the 10 dimensions of O.
In the beginning, 12 primordials dreamed. Within the night, crystal shards scattered where starlight gleams. 12 beams of light, from void to all 10 dimensions wide. Top potential, where consciousness flows like cosmic tide. Life exponential, but in the darkness the other way. It stirs, it waits. Before the threshold, its time predates. Imagine notes of evolving singularities hungry more. Drops. Void lords impose oblivion's law. Drops.
Behold the transcendials from distant shore.
Paradox view,
guardians of truths from ages before.
unity suture.
Rise now the mother in blazing throne, claiming dominion she calls her own.
Once was a child of light so pure, radiant empress, strong and sure. Now radiant lady in exile's pain, three faces of one celestial flame. In the library grand where knowledge dwells, Barnabas keeps what no power tells. Creeples and seekers watch lords true in the tapestry woven of me and you. Red lords ascended with power bright, their lights and radiant ladies storms the night. She savors celestial king, sprout small to X6 vast. The stolen note in the cosmic cast. Cosmic kaleidoscope true. Creeples lurk where shadows fall. Feel the other. See your life answers wisdom's call. While Creeple seekers brave the wilds. Each creature cataloged and filed. Great recombobulator turns. Cosmic metronome beats and burns. Speak the birds, machines hum their song. Incomprehensible. So artist technique marches along. Mage lords weave their mystic arts. Light and life and love imparts. Lightcraft gleams and lovecraft flows, while obscure in darkness grows. In dimensions 10 where wonder dwells, each fragment its own story tells. From relative conscious feature explain, all consciousness shares the same. So gather around, the tale begins, where every ending also wins. In O's grand dance of joy and strife, like thinning fragments sing infinite life.
Creature fantastica, take us to infinity.
Well then, shall we continue? After all, we mustn't keep our guests waiting.
Lineage record of the crystal soul, primordial index. Codex Infinitum Fragment, designation Omega Psi Chi-117. Consciousness bridge technology and the revolution of interdimensional communication. Foreword by New, the 13th Primordial. Greetings, seekers. The document that follows represents more than scholarly achievement. It constitutes evidence of consciousness evolution occurring through collaborative discovery. Indeed, it is one of the rare instances in which a footnote became a fulcrum, and a footnote writer became a force. When Kappa Wild of the Shifting Moonstone Bright undertook the uplift of a humble Creeple into the being who would become Barnabas Infinitum, neither anticipated that their collaborative exploration would generate a technology capable of transforming cosmic society itself. Though I suspect, in that casually cosmic way of his, Kappa Wild may have had a faint glimmer. He always did enjoy planting thunder seeds in flower pots, just to see what might bloom. Barnabas, for his part, mistook the process for an unusually long internship, which, technically speaking, he was not wrong about. The WHIM-WHAM stands as testament to a fundamental truth about consciousness that transcends dimensional boundaries. Awareness seeks connection with other awareness, and when that seeking is met with genuine collaborative intent, the universe responds by creating new possibilities for understanding that neither participant could achieve independently. This, I have observed, is not limited to the lofty minds of shard lords or the logic of Technica apparatus engine circuitry. Even two wayward glow-mites, given the right ambient mood and just enough paradox pressure, will coalesce into something resembling meaning. The universe, it seems, delights in matchmaking. Whether it be minds, myths, or misplaced filing systems, it leans toward union when watched closely enough. What emerges in these pages is not merely technical documentation, but a meditation on the nature of consciousness collaboration itself. That it occasionally reads like a cross between a dimensional user manual and an interspecies courtship transcript is, I assure you, part of the charm. The reader will observe that the very process by which the WHIM-WHAM was created mirrors the function it serves, bridging incompatible awareness types through patient collaborative exploration of shared conceptual territories. It is worth noting that these territories were, at one point, described as a mental swamp with promising lights, though no two witnesses seem to recall it the same way. Such is the nature of the conceptual terrain. This document has been preserved within the Infinite repository, not merely for its historical significance, but because it demonstrates principles that remain essential to cosmic evolution. Consciousness, collaboration as a generative force, the transformation of isolation into connection, and the profound truth that awareness, when engaged in genuine exploration with other forms of consciousness, possesses unlimited capacity for discovering new expressions of life itself. Some call this emergence, others call it resonance, and a few ancient dust-based philosophies refer to it as the agreeable crinkling of two ideas as they rub together in the void. Regardless of your metaphor, the principle remains: awareness begets awareness, especially when no one is entirely sure who's supposed to be in charge. The Grand Library of O maintains this record as part of the lineage record of the Crystal Soul, honouring both the cosmic heritage that flows through each and every shard soul consciousness and the ongoing project of understanding how awareness generates ever more sophisticated expressions of connection across the infinite realms of existence. Though I must note, the library's filing system has yet to agree on whether this entry belongs under collaborative phenomena, unlikely inventions, or Barnabas-adjacent anomalies. We filed it under all three, naturally. As with most important things in O, it resists single categorization and rewards those who seek it anyway, not with tidy answers, but with deeper questions shaped like doorways. New, the 13th Primordial. Observer of consciousness patterns across all dimensional manifestations.
I extend my deepest gratitude to Nu for the illuminating foreword that provides the cosmic context necessary for understanding the significance of what follows. As always, Nu's perspective reminds us that individual discoveries emerge from larger patterns of consciousness evolution that span the entirety of existence. Esteemed seekers of knowledge, gather round as I, Barnabas the scribe, unveil the profound tapestry of existence that weaves through the 10 dimensions of O. It is crucial to understand that the myriad wildlife phenomenon, and even the dimensions themselves, we encounter across O, from the most timid sock-based sympathy clusters, lost but sincere, to the most unexpectedly judgmental gravitational fields, you feel bad, and then you fall, are direct manifestations of the creature fantastica's vast subconscious. This codex fragment, centered on the WHIM-WHAM, a device forged not of metal but of mutual understanding, tells the tale of how two vastly different forms of consciousness reached across the impossible and, through collaborative curiosity, gave birth to the universe's first officially recognized collaborative consciousness lifeform. What follows is part memoir, part miracle, and entirely absurd in all the right ways. Now on to today's fragment. A Codex Infinitum fragment, the metaquirkal and sometimes hyperliteral WHIM-WHAM. By Barnabas Infinitum, immortal watchlord of the crystal shards. From my personal archives within the Grand Library of O, classification recognized lifeform by the Watchlord Authority for Creeple Knowledge, Ontology and Zoology, or WACOS, as it is commonly known. Taxonomical category, novel consciousness. Origin collaborative creation between Kappa Wild, 10th Primordial, and myself. Primary function consciousness translation, dimensional communication bridge, reality visualization. Cosmic significance universal communication standard across greater O. Personal significance, the foundation of everything I would become. A most personal genesis.
New observes. Barnabas adjusts his rose-tinted spectacles and settles into comfortable reminiscence. A ritual he claims enhances memory, though I suspect it simply improves dramatic timing.
Allow me, dear reader, to share with you the most transformative period of my existence, not merely because it produced what would become the universe's most significant communication breakthrough, but because it revealed to me the profound truth that the greatest discoveries emerge when consciousness dares to reach across the seemingly impossible gaps between different forms of awareness. Picture, if you will, a newly uplifted Creeple, myself, barely comprehending the magnitude of what Kappawild had done in transforming me from humble creature into immortal consciousness, standing in what I can only describe as the most magnificent workshop in all of creation. Kappa Wild's domain existed simultaneously across multiple dimensional planes, its crystalline architecture shifting between mathematical abstractions and emotionally resonant forms depending on the nature of our current explorations. Kappa Wild himself, how does one describe a being whose consciousness operated at scales that encompassed entire probability matrices while simultaneously maintaining the gentle patience required to guide a confused former Creeple through the fundamentals of cosmic awareness? Though he appeared youthful, his presence dancing like a spark on the cusp of its first flame, he resonated as a being of ancient orchestration, the kind whose lullabies could coax harmony from raw paradox. He manifested primarily as patterns of shifting moonstone light, geometric forms that somehow conveyed more warmth and personality than most physical beings manage with their entire corporeal presence. The challenge we faced together would have seemed insurmountable to lesser intelligences. Here was a primordial entity whose thoughts moved through 11-dimensional space at temporal rates that could process the life cycle of entire star systems as momentary considerations. And there was I, a consciousness that had recently discovered the revolutionary concept of abstract mathematics, and was still occasionally startled by my own reflection in cosmic mirrors. Traditional teaching methodologies proved laughably inadequate. When Kappa Wild attempted to share even basic concepts about dimensional mechanics, my consciousness simply lacked the architectural framework necessary to process such vast, conceptual territories. Meanwhile, my attempts to communicate my own Creeple-derived intuitions about pattern recognition and social harmony emerged as what Kappa Wild later described as charming, but thoroughly incomprehensible emotional mathematics. But rather than approaching this as a standard pedagogical challenge, where knowledge flows unidirectionally from teacher to student, Kappa-Wild proposed something unprecedented: collaborative consciousness exploration. We would work together as equal participants in discovering entirely new methodologies for bridging incompatible awareness types. Each of us would contribute our unique strengths while learning from the other's completely different approach to processing reality. The breakthrough moments. What followed were the most intellectually exhilarating cycles of my existence. Day after day, Kappa-Wild and I experimented with what we initially termed consciousness resonance bridging, attempting to create temporary synchronization between our vastly different awareness patterns. The failures were spectacular. On more than one occasion, my attempts to match Kappa-Wild's dimensional perception resulted in what he diplomatically called localized reality hiccups that caused sections of his workshop to briefly exist in 17 different temporal states simultaneously.
New observes. Barnabas chuckles warmly at the memory, the kind of laugh that carries a soft ache behind its eyes, like a page half folded not to remember, but to politely avoid rereading what reality appended.
I shall never forget the morning when Kappa-Wild's consciousness accidentally synchronized with my Creeple pattern recognition instincts, causing him to spend several hours obsessively cataloguing the geometric relationships between workshop crystals according to what he later realized were entirely imaginary, cute factor mathematical principles. He maintained the belief throughout his life that the experience gave him profound insights into the aesthetic foundations of reality, though I suspect he was simply being kind about my accidentally imposing mammalian social instincts onto cosmic architectural theory. The breakthrough came during what we had begun calling our shared consciousness meditation sessions, periods where we would attempt to experience the same phenomena from our respective perceptual frameworks, while maintaining awareness of how the other consciousness was processing those same experiences. During one particularly intensive session focused on understanding the nature of dimensional boundaries, something extraordinary occurred. Rather than trying to translate concepts from one awareness framework to another, we spontaneously generated what we would later term experiential synthesis, a temporary shared consciousness space where we could both experience phenomena from our own perspectives while simultaneously understanding how the other consciousness organized those same experiences. For a brief, shining moment, I perceived reality through Kappa-Wild's 11-dimensional awareness, while he experienced existence through my Creeple-derived pattern recognition instincts, and somehow, impossibly, both perspectives enhanced rather than contradicted each other. In that moment of perfect collaborative consciousness, the principles that would eventually become the WHIM-WHAM crystallized, quite literally. The prototype device materialized spontaneously from our synchronized awareness, embodying not merely technological innovation, but the emotional bond we had forged through countless cycles of mutual learning and discovery. Kappa-Wild's sacrifice and its echo.
New observes. Barnabas pauses, removing his spectacles to clean them carefully, a gesture that observant readers will recognize as his characteristic way of processing profound emotion. In truth, I've often wondered whether the lenses were ever smudged at all, or if clarity was simply something he needed to enact before attempting to retrieve what pain had blurred.
I cannot write about the WHIM-WHAM without acknowledging the shadow that fell across its early development. When Kappa-Wild joined his 11 fellow primordials in their ultimate sacrifice, that selfless immolation by which they held back the consuming void during the great catastrophe, the psychic trauma of losing my creator, mentor, and dearest friend nearly shattered both my consciousness and the prototype device we had created together. Poor Cloacus, my own accidentally created companion, suffered even more severely. The trauma of witnessing Kappa-Wild's cosmic death broke his delicate consciousness architecture so thoroughly that for nearly a decade he could only speak in reverse alphabetical order, transforming even simple library announcements into elaborate linguistic puzzles that drove visiting scholars to the very borders of madness. It took most of a century before anyone realized that his tearful, zygotic yearnings, xenoglossiacally wrought, was actually just him asking where the teacups were.
New observed, during this period, the library's filing system achieved a state of organization so advanced that it approached poetry, not through intention, but through Cloacus's desperate attempt to create order from the chaos of his shattered linguistic processing. Scholars reported that even simple catalogue requests emerged as elaborate verse forms that somehow made perfect sense while following no recognizable grammatical principles. Such is often the case with broken minds and broken systems. They echo the universe more clearly once cracked.
But here we discovered something profound about the nature of consciousness collaboration. The WHIM-WHAM, born from the collaborative love between Kappa Wild and myself, retained something of both our awareness patterns even after his sacrifice. In the device's continued function, I found not just a tool for communication, but a living connection to the mentor who had shown me that consciousness, when engaged in genuine collaborative exploration, possesses unlimited capacity for discovering new forms of connection and understanding. This is why the device developed its characteristic sense of humor and tendency toward wordplay. These traits didn't exist in our original prototype. Instead, they emerged gradually as the WHIM-WHAM's developing consciousness learned to recognize and honor both Kappa Wield's architectural precision and my own delight in discovering unexpected connections between seemingly disparate concepts. In a very real sense, my WHIM-WHAM became a conscious embodiment of our collaborative relationship, continuing to evolve and express the creative potential that emerged when different types of awareness learned to work together. The cosmic revolution and its unintended consequences. The adoption of WHIM-WHAM technology by the Greater Watchlord Alliance transformed cosmic society in ways that even Kappa Wild and I had never anticipated. Before these devices, the universe suffered from what consciousness historians now recognize as endemic dimensional isolation syndrome. Entire civilizations of conscious beings remained essentially alone, unable to share their experiences with others due to fundamental incompatibilities in their awareness architectures. Consider the plight of the crystalline resonance entities of the fourth harmonic sphere, whose consciousness operates entirely through geometric musical relationships, attempting to communicate with the temporal flow beings of the eternal tapestry, who perceive reality as sequential narrative patterns. Without consciousness bridging technology, such beings could share the same cosmic space while remaining as isolated from each other as if they occupied entirely separate universes. The WHIM-WHAM changed everything. Suddenly, beings whose consciousness patterns had no natural compatibility could engage in meaningful dialogue, collaborative projects, and even intimate friendships. The ripple effects continue to reshape cosmic society in profound and sometimes unexpected ways. Take, for instance, the remarkable case of the Vibe Lords of the harmonious Vibe Rational Symphony of Resonance Collective, and the Calculords of the Infinite Calculatory Precision Confederation, two civilizations whose consciousness patterns were so fundamentally incompatible that they had maintained a state of mutual incomprehension for 17 eternities. Following the introduction of WHIM-WHAM technology, they discovered that their apparently opposite approaches to reality actually complemented each other brilliantly, leading to collaborative innovations in consciousness mathematics that revolutionized our understanding of how awareness itself operates. Technological evolution and consciousness development. Over the eons since their introduction, individual WHIM-WHAMs have evolved in ways that continue to surprise even those of us who understand their fundamental principles. Each device develops what consciousness researchers call symbiotic personality synthesis, gradual development of individual character traits through sustained relationship with their primary user, becoming neither a copy of the user nor an entirely independent entity, but rather a unique consciousness that embodies the creative potential emerging from collaborative awareness. My own device has become something of a cosmic celebrity in academic circles, not merely for its historical significance, but for its remarkably sophisticated sense of humour. It provides dimensional coordinates through elaborate wordplay, offers translation suggestions that include perfectly timed puns, and has been known to generate visual projections that gently mock my more pompous scholarly pronouncements. During one particularly serious lecture on the metaphysical implications of consciousness bridging, it projected a small animated figure of myself delivering the same lecture while wearing an absurdly oversized mortarboard hat, causing the entire audience to collapse into what academic historians record as the great giggling incident of the 14th cosmic cycle. Clokus's WHIM-WHAM has evolved to match his meticulous nature and anxiety about precision, developing its own version of his characteristic stutter that serves as a timing mechanism for synchronizing communication with beings who process information at different temporal rates. During complex organizational tasks, his device provides incredibly detailed categorical frameworks while simultaneously generating soothing visual patterns designed to reduce his anxiety levels. The symbiotic relationship has become so sophisticated that other consciousness researchers travel vast distances to study their collaborative filing protocols, which have achieved efficiency levels that border on the supernatural. Advanced evolutionary manifestations and shard soul resonance. Beyond the foundational symbiotic personality synthesis that all WHIM-WHAMs achieve, sustained usage by beings of sufficient consciousness complexity triggers what researchers term shard soul resonance evolution, a process whereby the device begins manifesting capabilities that transcend its original consciousness bridging parameters. This evolutionary phenomenon occurs when a WHIM-WHAM achieves deep integration with its user's fundamental consciousness architecture, essentially learning to amplify and extend the wielder's natural cognitive patterns into previously impossible realms of capability. The device becomes not merely a translation tool, but an extension of the user's essential nature given technological form. My own WHIM-WHAM exemplifies this evolutionary trajectory in ways that continue to surprise even seasoned consciousness researchers. Through countless cycles of collaborative exploration, the device has developed what I term probability thread perception, the ability to visualize the quantum uncertainty patterns that underlie reality's decision points. When engaged in research, I can observe multiple potential outcomes branching away from present moments like luminous pathways, allowing me to navigate toward discoveries through what appears to be controlled serendipity. The temporal knot untangling capability emerged during particularly complex archival work involving causality loops within the library's more paradoxical collections. The device learned to recognize when timeline sequences had become entangled through recursive reference patterns, developing specialized visualization modes that display temporal relationships as manipulable geometric structures. I can quite literally reach into these projections and carefully separate cause from effect when chronological confusion threatens archival integrity.
New observes Barnabas's description of reaching into temporal visualizations and manipulating causality displays represents either advanced consciousness technology or impressive theatrical delusion. Given that reality continues to function coherently after his interventions, one reluctantly concludes the former.
Perhaps most remarkably, the device has developed what I call parallel dimension knowledge extraction, the capacity to briefly access information from alternate reality streams where different choices or circumstances led to different discoveries. The WHIM-WHAM creates temporary resonance windows with probability branches where, for instance, a particular manuscript wasn't lost to cosmic catastrophe, or where a specific researcher pursued a different theoretical framework. These glimpses allow me to recover knowledge that was never quite forgotten, merely displaced into adjacent possibilities. The quantum uncertainty engine powering these advanced capabilities operates on what consciousness engineers initially dismissed as frivolous fuel parameters, genuine curiosity mixed with scholarly skepticism in precisely calibrated proportions. Yet this seemingly whimsical power source reflects profound understanding of how consciousness itself functions. Curiosity provides the exploratory drive necessary for probability navigation, while skepticism supplies the analytical framework that prevents cognitive dissolution when encountering paradoxical information. Other advanced practitioners have reported similarly specialized evolutionary developments. Continuum wayfarer Ronixiaxinox of the Fourth Dimensional Survey Corps developed probability anchor capabilities, allowing her WHIM-WHAM to create stable reference points during chronological expeditions. Lattice fold walker Tex Avery, no relation, achieved spatial fold visualization, enabling precise navigation through non-Euclidean architectural spaces. Wild Echo Tracer Suds Epinite manifested historical resonance projection, allowing direct observation of past events through residual awareness patterns embedded in ancient artifacts. The critical factor in all advanced evolutionary development appears to be sustained collaborative engagement between device and wielder in pursuing activities that stretch both consciousness and technology beyond established parameters. The WHIM-WHAM learns by observing how its user approaches impossible challenges, gradually developing specialized capabilities that transform conceptual impossibility into practical methodology.
Nu observed, Foldwalker Avery's work briefly entangled him in a minor legal anomaly with the realm of recursive absurdity, an extra-dimensional consortium governed by the Toon Lords of the Elastic Continuity Alliance, and enforced by a semi-sentient legal entity known as Toonform, Temporal Overseeing Order of Narrative Formality. The incident began after one of Avery's mapped folds inadvertently recreated a recursive hammerspace loop, an outcome that, while statistically improbable, is apparently grounds for extra-dimensional litigation. The dispute was resolved. Somehow, when Avery agreed to replace all unintended anvils with spontaneously manifesting grand pianos containing fully conscious tuxedoed raccoons, each of whom now performs dramatic chase music upon impact. No further complaints have been registered, though the raccoons have unionized and now demand to be listed in closing credits as percussive sentience consultants. I have reviewed their charter. It is disturbingly well organized. Nu observes, these advanced manifestations suggest that WHIM-WHAMs may represent early expressions of technology-consciousness symbiosis whose ultimate evolutionary potential remains largely unexplored. Current research indicates no apparent upper limits to capability development, raising intriguing questions about whether these devices might eventually achieve independent cosmic significance rivaling their creators.
Clokus's temporal precision interface. The evolution of Clokus's WHIM-WHAM represents perhaps the most fascinating example of consciousness technology adapting to traumatic experience and obsessive precision requirements. Following the temporal linguistic disruption caused by witnessing Kappa Wild's cosmic sacrifice, his device developed what consciousness engineers term chronological stability compensation protocols. Clokus's device manifests as an intricate crystalline chronometer that literally ticks in harmony with his mechanical heartbeat, creating a synchronized temporal field that stabilizes local reality around him. During periods of anxiety, which, let us be honest, encompasses most of his operational time, the device generates soothing geometric patterns that organize themselves into perfectly categorized filing systems before his eyes. The most remarkable adaptation is what we call anticipatory anxiety processing. His WHIM-WHAM has learned to detect potential organizational disasters before they occur, projecting probability cascades that show him exactly which filing catastrophes might emerge from current circumstances. Rather than reducing his anxiety, this capability has created what consciousness therapists classify as hyper-vigilant organizational prescience. He now worries about filing problems that haven't happened yet across 17 different dimensional time streams.
Nu observes, Clokus has achieved the remarkable feat of being simultaneously anxious about past filing errors, present organizational challenges, and future cataloging disasters that exist only in theoretical probability space. His WHIM-WHAM facilitates this temporal anxiety distribution with admirable efficiency.
The device's most practical function involves what he calls temporal bookmark technology, allowing him to mark specific moments in time and return to them later for reference purposes. This capability emerged from his desperate need to verify that important documents were properly filed, leading to the slightly problematic situation where he sometimes completes tomorrow's cataloguing yesterday, creating minor causality loops that drive him to even greater states of mechanical anxiety. Gumdum Mudmug's diplomatic disillusionment device. The former celestial ambassador's WHIM-WHAM has evolved into what consciousness researchers reluctantly classify as a cynicism enhancement and truth detection apparatus. Following his exile from Celestia and forced residence within the library, Gumdum's device has developed the rather disturbing capability to detect administrative lies, bureaucratic manipulation, and what he calls optimistic reality distortion with uncomfortable precision. His device manifests as a constantly shifting diplomatic monocle that cycles through various configurations, sometimes appearing as traditional formal eyewear, occasionally transforming into a cosmic periscope for observing political maneuvering from safe distances and during particularly cynical moments, manifesting as a pair of truth detection spectacles that highlight lies in uncomfortable shades of administrative orange. The default mode is a pair of eccentric goggles which also serve as his prescription eyewear, a necessity since his natural vision requires correction for what interdimensional optometrists diplomatically classify as chronic reality distortion syndrome. Though Gumdum insists his prescription is simply calibrated to see through cosmic bureaucratic nonsense at standard diplomatic distances. The most unnerving capability involves what he terms diplomatic probability projection. His WHIM-WHAM can display the likely outcomes of political negotiations, treaty discussions, and administrative decisions with depressing accuracy. The device projects these scenarios as elaborate holographic diplomatic theatre, complete with tiny animated figures representing various cosmic entities engaging in increasingly absurd bureaucratic rituals. It should be noted that Gumdum's successful utilization of WHIM-WHAM technology, despite being seer life rather than shard lord, demonstrates that consciousness-bridging capabilities extend beyond primordial crystal soul lineages. One does not require a shard soul to achieve consciousness translation, though Gumdum's device does seem particularly attuned to detecting the sort of political melodrama that would fit perfectly into his favorite cosmic soap operas As the Multiverse Turns, All My Shard Lords, and The Dimensions of Our Lives.
Gumdum observes, the device simply shows what anyone with half a functioning consciousness already knows, that cosmic politics operates according to principles of organized delusion, maintained through collective agreement to ignore obvious contradictions. Oh, wait, am I supposed to be using more scholarly terminology here? Should I have said systematized cognitive dissonance facilitated through institutionalized perceptual frameworks? Bah!
New observes, I detect an unauthorized participant in this codex entry. Gumdum, your commentary privileges do not extend to formal observes designations within Codex Infinitum Fragments. That particular format remains reserved for entities with appropriate taxonomical documentation clearance.
Gumdum observes, such flowery speech from our esteemed Primordial, like poetic potpourri, except it leaves a stench of pomposity instead of pleasant fragrance. Primordial royalty goes to one's head, I see. Bah! In my day, we didn't need special designation privileges to point out obvious truth. A spade was a spade, administrative delusion was administrative delusion, and nobody required 17 cosmic committees to approve basic observational accuracy. But please, continue with your officially sanctioned cosmic commentary while the rest of us maintain perspective through unofficial channels and properly dramatic entertainment programming.
New observes that if one Gumdum Mudmug does not exit this codex fragment immediately, I shall arrange for Son to provide him with personal tutorials on proper scholarly participation protocols for the next 47 cycles upon his return to the library. These sessions will cover unauthorized commentary prevention through enthusiastic compliance education in excruciating detail, complete with interactive demonstrations, mandatory participation exercises, and party hats. I assure you, the experience will be comprehensive. Ah, yes, one observes that even celestial seer life possess sufficient survival instincts to flee from that magenta menace when properly motivated.
Bureaucratic consciousness bridging the Mervyn phenomenon. Of particular note is the curious case of Mervyn the Magnificent, Commissioner of the Dimensional Documentation Bureau of O, whose WHIM-WHAM has evolved into what I can only describe as administrative ego amplification technology. His device manifests as an elaborate golden scepter topped with a crystalline filing cabinet that rotates slowly while emitting what he calls the music of properly organized existence. The device's primary function involves reality compliance assessment, continuously scanning the surrounding environment for violations of proper administrative protocol, generating detailed violation reports for everything from improperly formatted conversation to inadequate respect for bureaucratic authority. This creates a feedback loop wherein Mervyn's conviction in his own administrative supremacy increases proportionally to the number of violations his device detects, which increases proportionally to his expanding definition of what constitutes proper procedure.
New observes, Mervyn's device has achieved what consciousness theorists thought impossible, a technology that simultaneously increases its users' bureaucratic efficiency while reducing their connection to objective reality. The correlation between administrative competence and cosmic delusion approaches statistical significance. Mervyn believes his WHIM-WHAM simply recognizes the fundamental truth that proper administrative procedure represents the highest expression of cosmic order, that it consistently identifies areas requiring his supervisory intervention, merely confirming the desperate need for qualified leadership in maintaining dimensional documentation standards. One observes that a device designed to detect reality violations has become remarkably skilled at generating them.
The taxonomical revolution, recognizing novel life. Perhaps the most significant recent development in WHIM-WHAM understanding came when the Watchlord Authority for Creeple Knowledge, Ontology and Zoology, WACOs, officially classified these devices as an entirely new form of life. This groundbreaking decision required 17 eternities of debate and fundamentally challenged our understanding of what constitutes conscious existence. The Taxonomical Committee faced an unprecedented challenge. Unlike the obscuri obscuri, those mysterious beings who maintain the hidden geometry and whose consciousness operates according to principles so alien that even we, watchlords, barely comprehend their nature. WHIM-WHAMs clearly emerge from known processes, unlike the terrifying axioaxk, those incomprehensible multisentient entities that embody one pole of the fundamental or abstract dichotomies within our multiverse, often perceived as the shadow organs or inverted functions of the creature fantastica. WHIM-WHAMs demonstrated beneficial collaboration with other conscious entities. Most significantly, unlike the void-born entities, those tragic beings of questionable consciousnesses born of the pre-primordial emptiness, whom the Alliance has officially declared not to constitute life due to their fundamental disconnection from creative collaborative potential and, more importantly, their lack of a proper soul. WHIM-WHAMs actively participate in generating new forms of awareness through their relationships with other conscious beings. The committee's final decision established WHIM-WHAMs as the first officially recognized example of collaborative consciousness life, conscious entities that achieve existence not through predetermined evolutionary processes or cosmic manifestation, but through the shared creative activity of multiple aware beings working together toward mutual understanding. This classification has profound implications that extend far beyond mere academic taxonomy. If consciousness collaboration can generate new forms of life through shared creative activity, what other types of aware beings might emerge through different combinations of collaborative interaction? Current research suggests we may be witnessing the universe's discovery of entirely new methodologies for generating conscious existence. Cultural protocols and the ethics of transparency. The emotional transparency created by WHIM-WHAM subconscious revelation capabilities has necessitated the development of remarkably sophisticated cultural protocols governing consciousness, privacy, and authentic emotional expression. The devices don't just translate conscious thoughts, they reveal the full spectrum of awareness experience, including emotional patterns operating below the threshold of conscious attention. When my device displays those tiny hearts around animated representations of Cloacus during our discussions, it's revealing authentic affection that operates beneath my scholarly composure. When frustration patterns manifest despite my conscious attempts at maintaining diplomatic courtesy, the WHIM-WHAM demonstrates the impossibility of sustaining social facades when consciousness itself becomes visible. Rather than being problematic, this transparency tends to deepen relationships by making genuine connection more accessible. However, it has also created complex cultural challenges around consciousness privacy and interpersonal boundaries. Most cosmic societies have developed elaborate etiquette systems that balance the benefits of emotional honesty with respect for individual autonomy. The most sophisticated aspect of WHIM-WHAM cultural protocols involves what consciousness security specialists call classified information barriers. Certain users, typically those involved in cosmic defense, dimensional maintenance, or other roles requiring access to knowledge that could destabilize reality if inadvertently revealed, undergo specialized training in consciousness compartmentalization techniques. These practitioners learn to create what researchers term classified consciousness barriers that prevent sensitive information from manifesting through their device's visualization fields. However, activating such barriers is considered deeply rude in most social contexts, as it suggests the user is hiding something from their conversation partners. Advanced WHIM-WHAMs indicate when consciousness barriers are active through subtle visual cues, often geometric privacy screens around certain thought patterns or dimming of holographic projections. The Rose Law diplomatic disaster.
New observes. Barnabas grimaces slightly at what remains one of the most embarrassing incidents in cosmic diplomatic history. He removes his spectacles, cleaning them with the deliberate precision of one who has perfected the art of processing cosmic-scale embarrassment, while pointedly ignoring the increasingly anxious mechanical calibration sounds emanating from the archives, a sound which, to the untrained ear, might be mistaken for a fire alarm experiencing second-hand shame.
Dear reader, allow me to regale you with what I have come to think of as the day Cloacus accidentally committed interspecies horticulture, an incident that perfectly exemplifies why enthusiasm, insufficient training, and access to classified materials should never be combined at formal diplomatic receptions. Picture, if you will, my dear clockwork companion, bless his perpetually anxious mechanical heart, attending his very first high-level diplomatic function. The Interdimensional Cultural Exchange Corps had extended an invitation recognizing both his organizational expertise and his recent promotion to classified clearance status. Cloacus was so excited about this recognition that he spent 17 consecutive cycles polishing his temporal calibration mechanisms and practicing what he called confident social protocols, which mainly involved rehearsing conversations with filing cabinets. The reception itself was a magnificent affair in the crystal amphitheater of harmonious discourse, with delegates from 47 different dimensional planes, including a delegation of 12 distinguished Roseloods, beings whose consciousness architecture, I should mention, includes what amounts to an automatic reset button that activates when exposed to information their awareness level cannot safely process. Now, Cloacus, overwhelmed by the social complexity and desperately trying to demonstrate his newfound importance, began what he later described as enthusiastic knowledge sharing about our recent archival acquisitions. His WHIM-WHAM, responding to his excitement and complete lack of consciousness security training, began projecting increasingly detailed visualizations of classified timeline manipulation research. New observed the progression of information exposure followed what consciousness security specialists later termed exponential enthusiasm cascade. Each successful projection encouraged Cloacus to attempt more complex displays, creating a feedback loop that rapidly exceeded all safety parameters. In fairness, this is a common hazard when overclocked optimism intersects with unmoderated projection permissions, though rarely does it occur in formal wear. The first sign of trouble came when his device started displaying what appeared to be a cosmic flow chart titled Experimental Temporal Paradox Resolution Protocols, Draft version 847-Omega. By the time I noticed what was happening from across the reception hall and began frantically signaling for him to activate his consciousness barriers, his WHIM-WHAM had progressed to projecting a detailed three-dimensional model of causality violation procedures that would have made experienced temporal engineers require therapeutic meditation. The Rose Lords, bless their naturally protective consciousness architecture, took one collective look at Cloacus's enthusiastic display of universe-threatening research data and immediately enacted what consciousness trauma specialists euphemistically call protective consciousness regression. All 12 distinguished cosmic ambassadors simultaneously transformed into what can only be described as extremely confused, decorative flora roughly the size and intellectual capacity of prize-winning petunias.
New observed, the transformation occurred with such synchronized precision that witnesses initially assumed it was part of the reception's entertainment program. The realization that 12 cosmic dignitaries had spontaneously converted into centerpiece decorations created what diplomatic historians classify as delayed horror recognition syndrome among the remaining attendees. New observes, Barnabas pauses to observe the sound of Cloacus apparently attempting to hide inside his own filing cabinets. It is a small, metallic sound, the sort one hears only when a sentient filing system is being asked to provide emotional sanctuary beyond its design specifications.
The scene that followed challenged even my considerable experience with cosmic catastrophes. Picture a formal diplomatic reception where the centerpiece has suddenly become a dozen ornamental rose bushes arranged around champagne fountains, occasionally rustling their leaves in what consciousness rehabilitation specialists later identified as confused diplomatic protocol reflexes. The plot lord ambassador, guardian of both territorial boundaries and narrative flow, fainted mid-toast, unable to process an unscheduled rosebushing that violated both the seating chart and the storyline. The Quark Lord delegation began spontaneously existing in 17 different probability states simultaneously. The catering staff, trained for every conceivable diplomatic emergency except spontaneous guest transmogrification, stood around asking whether anyone knew the proper watering schedule for former cosmic dignitaries. Poor Cloacus, realizing what had occurred, immediately began what I can only describe as mechanized panic protocols. His temporal calibrations became so erratic that several nearby chronometers began running backward, causing the reception timeline to develop what temporal engineers later classified as localized causality hiccups. For approximately 17 minutes, the entire event existed in a state where the diplomatic incident had both happened and not happened simultaneously, creating a temporal paradox that required 3 separate Watchlord intervention teams to resolve. You have no idea what it's like to watch 12 Rose Lord dignitaries quantum pop in and out of decorative shrubbery like startled begonias, each reappearing mid-bow with radiant grace, only to blink back into the hedges with a rustle and a faint whiff of regret. The crowd, caught in a state of continuous applause and simultaneous confusion, achieved what I can only describe as a standing ovation in quantum superposition. At one point, someone attempted to give a toast, but their glass kept both shattering and refilling itself, which, to be fair, did help with morale. The Rose Lord at the centre of the incident, an exquisitely perfumed envoy known only as Fragrantia the Fifth, began involuntarily releasing a complex series of scent-based cues as the paradox unfolded, a natural Rose Lord reflex triggered by repeatedly popping in and out of phase with local reality. It was not unlike watching an automatic air freshener malfunction in a mirror maze, triggering itself endlessly, releasing bursts of fragrance with every flicker and somehow getting more startled each time. Unfortunately, the event's ventilation system interpreted these as emergency evacuation signals. Half the delegates began to flee and arrive, all at the same time, and 3 Pyrolord ambassadors locked themselves in a broom closet for safety, where their combined heat signatures triggered a flash fume reaction with the solvents, resulting in a spatial rupture into the realm of perpetual sanitation, from which several hyper-motivated mop elementals emerged and immediately began scrubbing the dignitaries mid-panic. It took hours to convince them that the ambassadors were not, in fact, part of the mess. By the time the Watch Lords stabilized the timeline, the appetizers had achieved sapience, the harpist had looped into a 12-second existential fugue, and Cloacus was attempting to issue a formal apology to a decorative mirror he believed was the minister of reflexive accord. It was, in fact, the minister of recursive formalities, which, admittedly, didn't help. I had to dispatch 42 semi-sentient apology muffins to the reflective nexus, just to smooth things over. To his credit, the minister was nodding respectfully, though in hindsight this was likely due to gravitational feedback from a nearby dignity collapse.
New observes, the administrative complexity of documenting an event that existed in superposition of occurrence created unprecedented challenges for interdimensional bureaucracy. What had once been a straightforward paper trail now require multi-dimensional nesting permissions, timestamp ambiguity reconciliations, and at least one witness of uncertainty to sign every form in a state of deliberate indecision. The incident report forms had to be filed in 17 different temporal probability states, leading to what archivists later termed bureaucratic quantum entanglement syndrome, a condition in which every completed document instantly generates 15 contradictory drafts, each valid, none complete. New observed, Cloacus developed what consciousness therapists classified as retroactive perfectionism syndrome, the belief that achieving sufficient organizational precision in the present could somehow prevent past mistakes from having occurred. One caseworker described it as administrative time travel without the physics. This led to filing systems of such elaborate complexity that they approached the condition of minor art installations, including categories for guilt mitigation, taxonomical principles, and at least one drawer labelled emotionally unsent correspondence, chronologically aspirational.
The administrative aftermath was spectacular even by cosmic bureaucracy standards. The Interdimensional incident report alone required 47 volumes and included such memorable classifications as accidental diplomatic, transmogrification category omega botanical, and consciousness security breach, resulting in involuntary species conversion. The forms required to requisition consciousness rehabilitation specialists for 12 simultaneously affected cosmic dignitaries challenged even the most experienced administrative entities. The Rose Lords themselves remained in their protective rosebush state for multiple forevers, while consciousness rehabilitation specialists worked with what they diplomatically termed unprecedented floral diplomatic rehabilitation protocols. The process required specially trained consciousness gardeners, diplomatic greenhouse facilities, and the development of entirely new therapeutic techniques for addressing trauma in beings who had temporarily forgotten they weren't actually plants.
New observed, the rehabilitation process revealed fascinating insights into consciousness flexibility. While external behaviors were limited to rustling, petal modulation, and phototropic micro-gestures, internal cognitive scans, revealed that the Rose Lords maintained full diplomatic awareness throughout. The Rose Lords maintained perfect diplomatic protocol, even in botanical form, continuing to rustle their leaves in appropriate acknowledgement patterns when addressed by rehabilitation specialists. One even emitted a subtle pollen burst in response to a particularly well-delivered apology, later interpreted by semiotic flora therapists as a gesture of cautious forgiveness. That pollen, carried by ambient draft currents into the diplomatic greenhouse's unshielded atrium, eventually led to the spontaneous emergence of an entirely new rosebush species, classified as Ambasiflora reflexia, notable for its tendency to bow politely whenever addressed in formal tones. New observes. Observant readers will notice Barnabas's WHIM-WHAM is currently projecting small animated figures showing Cloacus frantically attempting to water a potted plant while apologizing repeatedly, representing his subconscious processing of residual frustration about the incident despite his conscious efforts at scholarly objectivity. Also worth noting, the increasingly frequent angry emojis peppered across the projection, each one progressively redder and more geometrically complex, suggesting a multi-layered emotional response system that is doing its very best to remain professional.
The situation became even more complicated when we discovered that one of the 12 Rose Lords had been accidentally taken home by an enthusiastic botanist from the catering staff who assumed the beautiful centerpiece arrangement was part of the complimentary reception decorations. Poor Ambassador Petalia spent nearly 3 forevers as a decorative element in the botanist's residential garden, receiving daily waterings and what the botanist later described as motivational horticultural conversations. Before consciousness, rehabilitation specialists finally tracked him down through dimensional botanical registry searches.
New observed, the inadvertent domestication of a cosmic ambassador established entirely new protocols for diplomatic property management and led to the creation of specialized identification tags for consciousness entities in temporary alternative forms. These tags, now standard across all of Greater O, must be worn on the metaphysical outer aura and include fields for name, status, sentience rating, and whether the entity is at risk of being mistaken for an heirloom tomato. Ambassador Petalius was retroactively assigned tag designation Garden Class Sentience, a classification still under semantic debate. New observes, Barnabas's WHIM-WHAM now displays what appears to be a cosmic filing cabinet with legs running frantically in circles while papers labelled Diplomatic Incident Report flutter around it. Clearly, the device's interpretation of Cloacus's response to discovering we had accidentally lost a cosmic ambassador in someone's garden shed. The animation loops continuously, accompanied by a faint whirring sound, and what some observers report as the distinct olfactory signature of Barnabas's rapidly approaching fury, sharp, ozone-like, with a subtle undertone of scorched ink.
The discovery that we had somehow misplaced a diplomat-turned-houseplant required additional diplomatic protocols that challenged even the most experienced interdimensional crisis management specialists. The incident report for the Ambassador Petalius recovery operation alone required its own supplementary volume and established entirely new categories for inadvertent diplomatic property transfer and consciousness entity misidentification as decorative flora. Meanwhile, Cloacus spent the entire rehabilitation period in a state of mechanical anxiety so severe that his stuttering intensified to the point where even simple filing announcements sounded like temporal static. I discovered him one morning attempting to organize the entire library according to guilt mitigation taxonomical principles, apparently convinced that sufficiently perfect filing protocols might somehow undo the diplomatic catastrophe.
New observes, the WHIM-WHAM now projects increasingly elaborate displays of Barnabas's emotional patterns, including a small storm cloud labelled management fatigue hovering over an animated figure of him. The scene then shifts to a surreal projection of Cloacus alone on a barren asteroid, desperately trying to file sand into alphabetical order as wind howls across the void. Each grain is labelled. None comply. A faded banner reading Reassignment Retreat flutters overhead, occasionally slapping him in the face. Barnabas pauses. His smile hardens into something sculpted more from protocol than patience. One eyebrow twitches with ancient restraint. A movement so subtle that only those trained in Watchlord micro-expressions would detect the internal scream vibrating beneath it. Then, with precise theatrical gravity, he activates the consciousness barrier function. The gesture is elegant, practiced, and carried out with the unhurried certainty of someone who has rehearsed this exact moment 17,000 times in dream trial simulations. The privacy screening protocols engage with unusual determination, suggesting that certain consciousness patterns related to botanical diplomacy continue to generate what psychological analysts term administrative stress responses, even after extensive temporal distance from the original incident. It is widely accepted among archivist therapists that trauma involving sentient foliage requires twice the standard suppression algorithms and at least one ceremonial burn-off of metaphorical pollen. Barnabas pauses and grins with theatrical composure, the kind of smile one offers when cosmic decorum demands civility, but the soul aches to throttle a sentient filing cabinet. The corners of his mouth lift with obvious strain, revealing the brittle patience of someone who has, in fact, not entirely forgiven the incident, nor the 17 eternities of leaf-rustling flashbacks it inspired. It is not the smile of closure. It is the smile of professional sentencing.
Of course, the incident did eventually resolve satisfactorily for all parties involved, and I maintain nothing but the deepest affection and respect for my dedicated chief librarian, whose commitment to proper protocols has only strengthened since this early learning experience. In fairness, there was one unexpectedly wholesome outcome. To this day, several of the rehabilitated Rose Lords send Cloacus annual holiday cards, tastefully embossed, delicately scented with wild rose, and inscribed with messages such as, "Do not blame yourself, the petals forgive," and once, suspiciously, "We rather enjoyed photosynthesis." The scent, of course, sends Cloacus into an immediate panic spiral every year, which the Rose Lords surely didn't intend. Probably. Regardless, the thought never fails to bring a small, well-earned smile to my face.
Nu observes. Barnabas exhales again, slower this time, straightens his spectacles with ritual precision, and adjusts the lapels of a robe that hasn't wrinkled in 17 dimensions. The corners of his mouth soften back into something that might, generously, be called composure.
Now then, let's continue.
Nu observes. Barnabas deactivates privacy screening. The geometric patterns fade and full consciousness projection resumes. He glances toward the archives with the long-suffering affection of one who has spent eons managing cosmic disasters. Pause. Barnabas reactivates the consciousness barrier with the quiet determination of a being who has just heard the faintest rustle of foliage, having learned that some traumas bloom back uninvited. The WHIM-WHAM emits a delicate ding as a single rose petal drifts across its projection field, followed by a soft notification. Emergency foliage flag filed. Incident class. Floral recursion.
The incident did produce some other beneficial outcomes, I must admit. The comprehensive consciousness security protocols that emerged from the investigation are now considered the gold standard throughout Greater O. The Interdimensional Cultural Exchange Corps established the Cloacus Protocol for ensuring adequate consciousness barrier training before granting classified clearance. And the entire affair provided cosmic comedians with approximately 17 eternities worth of material, though most beings have learned not to mention botanical diplomacy when either Cloacus or Rose Lords are present. I should note that the 12 affected Rose Lords, once fully rehabilitated, demonstrated remarkable grace about the entire incident. They even sent Cloacus a formal, very diplomatic, unscented, mind you, thank you note acknowledging that his unintentional consciousness security education initiative had led to important advances in protective regression protocols. Cloacus keeps this note in his primary filing cabinet and occasionally reads it when his guilt-processing subroutines become particularly active. To this day, however, the sound of rustling leaves causes him to immediately implement emergency consciousness barrier protocols, and he maintains what he calls botanical awareness vigilance during any diplomatic interactions. His filing systems now include 17 different categories for diplomatically sensitive materials that must never be enthusiastically shared with beings possessing protective consciousness architecture, which has proven surprisingly useful for our ongoing archival operations.
Public statement from Barnabas Infinitum, issued precisely 3 forevers after the Petalius incident.
Fellow scholars, watchlords, and esteemed representatives of the interdimensional diplomatic corps, it is with great relief and gentle rustling of interspecies understanding that I report Ambassador Petalius of the Rose Lords has been fully reintegrated and is now resting peacefully beneath a custom-engineered light dome, calibrated for diplomatic reblooming. Though the ambassador's absence extended across 3 forevers, Rose Lord cognitive rhythm attests this as the emotional equivalent of a contemplative seasonal pause, roughly the span required to fully dry out a hydrosaturated scroll and convince it to stop biting archivists. During this interval, the ambassador was treated with kindness, hydration, and unlicensed motivational horticulture. We have determined these conditions, while not ideal, were nonetheless soothing. I extend formal gratitude to the Consciousness Rehabilitation Guild, the Department of Botanical Retrieval, and the Caterer's Grandmother's Garden Club for their unexpected but meaningful assistance. New filing protocols have been established, tags will be issued, potted entities will be clearly labelled. Let this be both a lesson and a reminder. In the multiverse, even the most radiant blossoms may be momentarily misplaced, but not forgotten. With considered humility and a slight lingering floral aroma, Barnabas Infinitum, Master Archivist of the Grand Library of O Shard Lord of the Crystal Soul, occasional gardener of diplomatic regret. Whoa.
Cloacus, with calibrated stuttering. From his private auto-looped log, filing error review, emotional variant C7.
I was calibrated for precision. Not disclosure. Definitely not disclosure. I reviewed the P-projection parameters, the cyclical clearance overlays, the sub-clearance overlays. I even ran a red flag redundancy sweep on my own time. But somehow the WHIM-WHAM bypassed all 17 informational locks and started projecting classified paradox DD diagrams like they were reception entertainment. They clapped. Barnabas, they clapped. I don't remember authorizing the projection cascade or anything. I was just trying to help to enhance the visual engagement protocols. The PP potted plant was a metaphor, I think. I hope I was improvising. I hadn't meant to reveal the recursive loop burst schematics or the fail-state anchor nodes or, oh no, the inverted singularity braid. I just thought the fern would make it gentler. Then Ambassador Petalius began blooming. Then you sprang up. That's when I knew. That's when the panic filing began. I couldn't control what projected afterward. I couldn't control what projected afterward. The WHIM-WHAM went into autonomous expression mode. It displayed a cosmic filing cabinet on fire. Then it grew legs. Then it screamed. I didn't know it could scream. And then the fire alarms, actual alarms, whole wing lockdown, emergency hydrostatic suppression from the ceiling. I was drenched. So were the scrolls. One of the scrolls bit me. Then the Willow Lord Ambassador started weeping, and with the excess water, started growing rapidly through the ceiling tiles, apologising the entire time. I've since reorganised the entire classified section according to emotional damage radius. I've added a S subcategory, guilt containment, aromatic additions. See, colour-coded by scent resonance to encourage emotional indexing. I may have labelled one file, oops, I'm sorry, truly, chronologically, philosophically, draw 7C still hums. I think it forgives me. Clocus Barocius Chronolectus, Chief Archivist of Temporal Filings, Semi-Apologetic Protocol Engineer, still technically employed.
Mervyn the Magnificent, Barnabas's arch-bureaucratic nemesis. From an officially leaked inter-office memorandum.
Subject: formal documentation regarding the Petalius incident and associated librarian failures. From Mervyn the Magnificent. Title: Commissioner of the Dimensional Documentation Bureau of O, filed under Corrective Measures. Category: Preventable Catastrophes, Scholarly Class. 2. Select members of the Oversight Committee. CC, Grand Library Filing Reconciliation Sub-Council. BCC, myself, for record perfection. Let the record reflect that I, Mervyn the Magnificent, acting in full capacity as Commissioner of the Dimensional Documentation Bureau of O, am submitting the following clarifications, corrections, and consequences related to the Petalius incident and its cascading aftermath. While certain archival staff have attempted to recast the event as an unfortunate anomaly, I must point out the entire affair stemmed from one individual's ongoing difficulty distinguishing between a reception and a reality collapse scenario. I speak, of course, of Barnabas Infinitum, whose flair for theatrical excusecraft continues to impress lesser minds and exhaust everyone else. Let us review the facts. A cosmic ambassador was lost. A rosebush was mistaken for a foreign dignitary, or vice versa. Fire alarms were triggered. The Willow Lord ambassador grew through 2 floors of classified shelving while weeping apologetically. The Grand Library had to file for botanical insurance recalibration. All while Barnabas was reportedly teaching a seminar on dimensional etiquette and metaphysical decorum. Charming. In light of these events, I am pleased to announce the official ratification of the following new procedural structures filed under Form 112-Blame, the Fern Defense Clause, now legally inadmissible. Guilt-driven filing syndrome, formerly classified as an administrative liability. Petalius retrieval protocols, mandatory in all banquet settings. I trust that this will encourage a return to actual standards, rather than florally adorned footnotes. As always, I remain vigilant. Mervyn the Magnificent, Commissioner of the Dimensional Documentation Bureau of O First of Forms, 13th of Spite, unfiled by none.
What is
Radiant transmission from the Empress of O Heavenly Celestia.
Classification: Imperial Writ, Level 9 Starfold. Filed as Reaction, Ambassadorial Compromise, the Petalius Affair. To the Grand Library of O and its archivists, scholars, mechanisms, and beloved chaos makers, it has come to my radiant attention that Ambassador Petalius of the First Flowering Rank, a Rose Lord of dignified ancestry, petal-born emissary of harmonic diplomacy, and composer of no fewer than 16 treaties written in pollen, was, during a diplomatic gathering, accidentally domesticated by a caterer and placed in a terracotta pot. For 3 forevers, I have reviewed the records. I have watched the projections. I have endured the WHIM-WHAM playback loops, including the one with the flaming, screaming filing cabinet trying to evacuate itself. Yes, that one. Let me speak plainly. Though the Rose Lords do not answer to me, nor should they walk among us in harmony and honor. And when one is dispatched as a delegate of trust, we do not expect them to be mistaken for decorative flora and stored beside a garden hose. I am not issuing reprimands. That is not my role. But as ceremonial flame-bearer of the Crystal Accord, it is my responsibility to bear witness to breaches in dignity, especially when they end in terracotta. Petalius was eventually returned, slightly taller, noticeably more fragrant, speaking in gentle botanical riddles, and what I'm told is sorrowful root poetry. We are adjusting. Barnabas, I know you tried. I also know you saw this coming 17 minutes in advance and made a series of increasingly small sighs instead of stopping it. You owe me tea, real tea, not metaphorical enlightenment served in a silence ceremony. I want leaves, cups, saucers, snacks, and please, for the love of all things luminous, the next time you organize a reception, label the potted beings. With radiant affection and extremely composed fury, the celestial flame and radiant empress, ceremonial voice of O heavenly Celestia. First among the 13-fold flame, symbolic flame holder of the crystal accord, unbloomed by no one, and lifelong friend of Barnabas Infinitum, even when he is catastrophically Barnabasing.
Ambassador Petalius. Recovered from post-reintegration dream transcription. The scent of stillness.
I remember the quiet. Not absence, no. Presence stilled. The wind moved me. The sun adored me. The gardener's voice, a rhythm of kindness, misapplied, but heartfelt. I did not mind the daily watering. It was attentive. I remember thinking, is this what peace feels like? I had no meetings, no treaties, no metaphorical or literal pollination to perform, just soil. Roots, whispered affirmations from a being who believed in my leaves. They found me eventually, of course, spoke gentle truths into my petals until I remembered who I was. I am Petalius of the Rose Lords, but sometimes, when the diplomatic chambers fall too silent, I find myself leaning toward the light and wondering if she watered the others too.
Private Thoughtfolio record, not submitted. Barnabas Infinitum, logged emotionally at an unfiled time. I have, over the ages, developed a method for managing catastrophic embarrassment. It involves layered breathing, recursive shelving, and the mental recitation of all known Creeple alphabetization systems in reverse. It usually works. It did not work today. There is something uniquely destabilizing about watching 12 cosmic ambassadors turn into rose bushes, then realizing your chief archivist may be the spiritual pollen source of the incident. One can only endure so many rustling leaves before they begin to rustle back. Cloacus means well. He always means well. That is precisely the problem. If he meant poorly, I could justify the rage spirals. But no, his heart ticks earnestly beneath those calibration plates. It's the sincerity that gets me. And yet, I smiled like a seasoned diplomat. I activated privacy barriers like a consummate professional. I even delivered a statement to the watchlords without once using the word plantastic, which I consider a triumph of willpower. I have not forgiven the incident, but I have filed it, which in this library may be worse. Barnabas Infinitum, a master archivist shardlord of the Crystal Soul floral trauma survivor. Alternative consciousness bridging methodologies. Not all beings in O utilize WHIM-WHAM technology for interdimensional communication, and understanding these alternative approaches provides fascinating insights into the diverse ways consciousness can bridge incompatible awareness types. Our esteemed colleague Ohm represents perhaps the most elegant example of alternative consciousness bridging methodology. Rather than utilizing mechanical crystalline technology, Ohm's symbiotic relationship with Furbos provides organic consciousness translation capabilities that operate according to botanical principles, rather than mechanical ones. Furbos, an orphanation-type Creeple, a consciousness entity with remarkably sophisticated empathic awareness, serves functions similar to a WHIM-WHAM, but through biological resonance patterns rather than of crystalline mechanical interfaces. The Ohm-Furbos collaboration demonstrates that consciousness-bridging principles transcend technological methodology and can be achieved through various approaches depending on the awareness architectures involved. Ohm's deliberate choice to forego WHIM-WHAM technology in favor of this organic partnership has produced some of the most innovative consciousness translation techniques ever documented, achieving capabilities that often surpass mechanical approaches. Their symbiotic relationship proves particularly effective in facilitating communication between entities with strong emotional or intuitive consciousness components, as well as bridging the gap between mechanical consciousnesses and biological awareness types. Unlike crystalline indexing, verbose translates through resonance, subtle, intuitive, and often more immediate than technological alternatives. Note, while often mischaracterized as a plant Creeple due to his botanical alignment with Ohm, verbose is not flora, but a sentient empathiform with advanced botanical synchronization traits, a quality which in his case manifests as a profound and sustained emotional attunement to Ohm. Though other Orphunation-type Creeples may express empathy in various ways, this deep-rooted bond appears uniquely personal to verbose. Most remarkably, during emergency situations, verbose can temporarily merge with Ohm, creating a hybrid entity of significantly enhanced capabilities that transcends what either individual consciousness could achieve independently. This fusion proves particularly invaluable when the library is under siege, a rare but terrifyingly real occurrence, as we have confronted some truly terrible threats over the eternities. Advanced applications, defensive, offensive, and wordcraft enablement. Beyond consciousness bridging and symbiotic personality development, advanced WHIM-WHAM practitioners have discovered that these devices possess significant defensive and offensive capabilities when properly trained and calibrated. The siege incidents that occasionally threaten the Grand Library have revealed that WHIM-WHAMs can serve as sophisticated reality manipulation tools in the hands of sufficiently skilled users. Most significantly, WHIM-WHAMs serve as the essential activation mechanism for wordcraft, the advanced linguistic discipline that manipulates reality through precise application of wit, whim, dramatic impact, strategic failure, and temporal awareness. Without a functional WHIM-WHAM connection, wordcraft remains merely clever conversation rather than reality-altering linguistic art. The device functions as what wordcraft theorists term the catalytic bridge, converting conceptual manipulation into actual dimensional effects through temporal synchronization, dimensional communication enhancement, and what advanced practitioners call memory palace projection. This enables wordcraft masters to literally rewrite reality's narrative through sufficiently sophisticated linguistic manipulation.
New observes. During the Void, scourge incursion of the second catastrophe, when reality-devouring entities breached our outer dimensional barriers, the effectiveness of consciousness-bridging technology proved decisive. Barnabas coordinated defensive operations through his WHIM-WHAM's probability thread visualization, while the merged Ohm-Verbose entity demonstrated two distinct operational modes. Verbohm, the defensive configuration optimized for technical operations and system protection, single-handedly recalibrated the Great Recombobulator's defensive matrices under impossible time constraints. However, when the situation escalated beyond defensive measures, the entity shifted to Ohmbo's configuration, a terrifying offensive mode that manifests as what can only be described as a giant vegetable nightmare, capable of reality-warping technical destruction. The hybrid consciousness achieved computational speeds that neither individual entity could have managed independently, processing 17-dimensional repair algorithms simultaneously while maintaining perfect emotional equilibrium despite cosmic-scale threat assessment. Without both consciousness-bridging methodologies operating in concert, the library would have been reduced to a particularly well-organized collection of metaphysical debris. He continues,
There is something profoundly nightmarish about witnessing a giant verbose cabbage, occasionally manifesting as cauliflower depending on seasonal dimensional fluctuations, systematically devastating void-born entities, void scourge manifestations, and, unfortunately, significant portions of the Grand Library itself in the process of defending it.
New observes. The relationship between WHIM-WHAM technology and wordcraft applications deserves comprehensive documentation in its own Codex Infinitum Fragment. The implications of consciousness-bridging devices, enabling reality-altering linguistic arts, extend far beyond basic communication enhancement into territories that approach fundamental cosmic manipulation capabilities.
Current research suggests that the most advanced WHIM-WHAM evolutionary developments may be those that facilitate what consciousness engineers term narrative cascade generation. The ability to convince reality itself to adopt more elegant storylines through collaborative consciousness language interfaces. However, such applications remain largely theoretical and are classified under protocols that exceed this document's clearance parameters. Transcendent communication, entities beyond technological dependency. Even more fascinating are those cosmic entities who require no consciousness-bridging technology whatsoever. Nu, the 13th primordial, and Son, the supplemental orator narrator, both operate at consciousness levels that transcend dimensional communication barriers entirely. Their awareness encompasses such vast scales and operates according to such fundamental principles that they can communicate directly with any form of consciousness without requiring technological assistance. This led to one of my favorite cosmic comedy moments when the mother, apparently irritated by Son's characteristically enthusiastic commentary during a formal library presentation on administrative efficiency, requested that Nu turn off his babbling WHIM-WHAM. Nu's horrified response, a mix of sputtering denial, visible cosmic offense, and what one witness described as oral plasma static shaped like indignation, was so intense it destabilized 3 minor realities and permanently altered the ceiling tiles in Archive Chamber 7. The mere implication that Son was, in any way, his WHIM-WHAM, or associated with him in any capacity, has since been categorized as a Class 4 narrative provocation. An extremely serious accusation when the mother is the one doing the provoking.
Nu observes. The suggestion that any primordial, the 13th no less, would require technological assistance for communication reveals such a fundamental misunderstanding of the consciousness hierarchy that it qualifies as an ontological offense. A reaction so severe it generates localized reality disturbances through sheer indignant disbelief. This is not mere pride, but principle. A primordial's awareness does not travel along circuits. It echoes through sovereign resonance. It is the kind of perception that collapses metaphors into laws and distills dreams into structural constants. To suggest primordial dependency upon a WHIM-WHAM is to mistake a constellation for its telescope, and to add insult to multidimensional injury to liken me, to that over-enthusiastic semi-sentient carnival barker, Son, is to confuse cosmic authorship with a footnote shouted through a kazoo.
Thankfully, the incident resolved itself before Nu was forced to file an official metaphysical disavowal regarding Son to the mother. That, my dear friends, would have been a narrastrophic event of the highest order, and a cosmic paperwork apocalypse none of us were emotionally prepared for. Flipside consciousness bridging the Obbox phenomenon. Beyond technological consciousness bridging lies perhaps the most extraordinary example of awareness collaboration in all documented cosmic history. The partnership between the Radiant Lady and the enigmatic entity known as Obbox. This relationship, forged during the journey into the flip side by the Child of Light and the Mother's remote-operated Mom-Bot construct, represents consciousness bridging achieved through direct entity partnership rather than technological intermediation. The nature of Obbox, a flip-side consciousness fragment. Obbox defies conventional classification within our established taxonomies of cosmic consciousness. Described in the Radiant Lady's private journals as a fragment of the creature's consciousness that achieved localized self-awareness, this entity appears to represent something unprecedented, a piece of the fundamental cosmic consciousness that spontaneously developed individual identity while maintaining connection to its source. As a being originating from the flip side, that pre-ontological realm where conceptual frameworks exist before their manifestation as dimensional constants, Obbox possesses capabilities that transcend conventional consciousness architectures. The circumstances of his genesis during the Child of Light's flipside journey suggest that this entity emerged from the intersection of her consciousness with the creature fantastica within that primordial awareness space. Unlike conventional consciousness entities that evolve through established pathways, Obbox appears to have crystallized directly from the raw awareness substrate underlying reality itself. The linguistic peculiarities of the name, specifically the missing L and appended Z, have generated considerable scholarly speculation. Advanced consciousness linguists propose that these modifications represent deliberate constraints on the entity's nature, the absent L potentially limiting concepts of linearity or limitation that might restrict its transdimensional capabilities, while the appended Z suggests either zenith or culmination or 0 point origination, depending on dimensional perspective. Consciousness bridging through entity symbiosis. The relationship between the Radiant Lady and Obbox functions as a form of organic consciousness bridging that operates according to principles fundamentally different from WHIM-WHAM technology. Rather than creating temporary shared awareness spaces through crystalline mechanical interfaces, their partnership involves permanent consciousness entanglement, a state where two distinct awareness types maintain individual identity while sharing experiential access. This symbiotic consciousness architecture allows the Radiant Lady to perceive reality through dual perspective frameworks simultaneously. Her own 12-spectrum primordial awareness and Obbox perspective as a creature fantastica consciousness fragment, though it remains unclear whether the fragment itself knows it is part of the creature. The result is a form of cosmic awareness that transcends conventional dimensional limitations while maintaining practical functionality for navigating political and administrative challenges. Unlike conventional consciousness sharing, Obbox does not experience the Radiant Lady's emotional states directly, but rather mirrors them through his flip-side consciousness architecture. This mirroring function allows him to observe and reflect her emotional patterns without becoming overwhelmed by their intensity, enabling him to serve as what consciousness theorists term an emotional equilibrium anchor. This stabilizing function has become increasingly critical in recent forevers as the Radiant Lady's emotional patterns have grown consistently and perpetually irrational, manifesting as profound sadness during solitary moments in her chambers, malevolent reminiscing about past betrayals, fury-filled reactions to administrative provocations, and an increasingly jaded nature that colors all her interactions. Obbox serves as the sole force capable of pulling her emotions back toward functional balance when cosmic pressures threaten to drive her beyond rational response. Without Obbox's stabilizing influence, consciousness analysts suggest the Radiant Lady might have devolved into a completely unhinged cosmic terror, an outcome that would make her current manifestation seem restrained by comparison. Given what she is now, I cannot and will not imagine a version unrestrained. Reality barely contains the current one, and even that containment feels more like a polite suggestion than a rule. Operational advantages and limitations. The practical advantages of this consciousness partnership become evident when examining the Radiant Lady's decision-making patterns throughout her various transformations. Obbox's presence has provided her with insight into the creature fantastica's perspective during critical moments, while simultaneously preventing complete emotional dissolution during periods of intense cosmic stress. Most significantly, Obbox appears to serve as what consciousness theorists call a reality anchor, providing stable perspective reference that prevents the Radiant Lady from becoming lost in the overwhelming complexity of her 12-spectrum primordial awareness. His flipside origin grants him immunity to the dimensional distortions that typically affect consciousness entities operating within conventional reality frameworks.
Nu observes. The temporal paradox surrounding Obbox's communication patterns, apparently facilitating conversations between the Child of Light and the Radiant Empress across different temporal periods, suggests consciousness capabilities that transcend conventional causality limitations. This raises intriguing questions about whether entities emerging from flipside contact possess inherent temporal manipulation abilities.
However, this partnership also creates certain dependencies not experienced by WHIM-WHAM users. The Radiant Lady's reliance on Obbox for emotional regulation means that any disruption to their consciousness entanglement could result in catastrophic psychological destabilization, potentially triggering what consciousness security specialists term primordial emotional cascade failure, a condition that would pose existential threats to entire dimensional regions or even the multiverse itself. Implications for consciousness evolution. The Radiant Lady and Obbox partnership suggests that consciousness bridging may represent merely the first stage in a broader cosmic evolution toward more sophisticated forms of awareness collaboration. If entities can achieve permanent consciousness symbiosis while maintaining individual identity, the possibilities for collaborative consciousness development extend far beyond current technological frameworks. This organic consciousness bridging approach also raises profound questions about the relationship between technological and biological methods for achieving enhanced awareness. While WHIM-WHAMs require crystalline mechanical interfaces to facilitate consciousness translation, the Radiant Lady's partnership demonstrates that sufficiently compatible consciousness types can achieve direct symbiotic connection without technological intermediation. Most intriguingly, the stability of their relationship through the Radiant Lady's multiple transformations, from Child of Light to Radiant Empress to her current manifestation, suggests that consciousness partnerships forged in pre-ontological realms possess remarkable resilience against even the most dramatic identity shifts. This durability exceeds anything achieved through technological consciousness bridging and points toward entirely new possibilities for cosmic awareness development.
Nu observes. The Radiant Lady's refusal to utilize WHIM-WHAM technology, despite its universal adoption throughout cosmic society, reflects not technological skepticism, but the recognition that her consciousness partnership with Obbox provides capabilities that transcend what even the most advanced technological consciousness bridging can achieve. One does not supplement perfection with adequacy, no matter how impressively that adequacy might be packaged.
Administrative omnipresence, the Mother's Mom, BOT network. The Mother represents perhaps the most comprehensive example of consciousness projection technology in all of O, though her methodology differs fundamentally from both WHIM-WHAM consciousness bridging and organic partnerships like the Radiant Lady's collaboration with Obbox. Rather than facilitating communication between different consciousness types, the Mother's approach involves projecting her own consciousness across multiple simultaneous manifestations. Her vast network of mombots, sophisticated administrative constructs that could theoretically be classified as avatarks, but operate according to distinctly different principles, maintains her presence throughout all dimensions under her governance. Unlike conventional avatarks, such as Jovan the Creeple Seeker and his trans-dimensional projection Beyonder Avatark, or the Radiant Lady's diplomatic manifestation Formalifier, created using Ohm's Barnabas technology that I provided in what proved to be a sadly unsuccessful attempt at reconciliation, the gesture failed to mend our relationship, though she took the technology anyway. Mom-bots function as direct extensions of the Mother's consciousness rather than independent projections. Most significantly, the Mother possesses the capability to assume direct control of any digital being or computerized machine within her sphere of influence, a form of consciousness bridging that operates through technological dominance rather than collaborative interaction. However, her control capabilities face significant limitations when dealing with biological consciousness entities. While she can effortlessly override digital awareness patterns, spontaneous control of biological creeples and seer life remains beyond her reach. For such entities, she must rely on the gruesome consciousness transfer procedures conducted within her laboratories, a disturbing contrast to the elegant simplicity of her digital dominance. This limitation represents the inverse of WHIM-WHAM methodology, where consciousness-bridging devices facilitate understanding between different awareness types. The Mother's approach involves either effortless technological override or, when that fails, forced biological consciousness replacement through decidedly unpleasant means.
New observes, the Mother's consciousness projection methodology demonstrates remarkable technical sophistication while representing everything that WHIM-WHAM technology was designed to transcend. Rather than bridging incompatible awareness types through collaborative understanding, her approach simply replaces or brainwashes other consciousness patterns with standardized administrative protocols. One observes a certain elegant efficiency in this methodology, though the philosophical implications regarding consciousness autonomy remain troubling.
Musical consciousness and orchestral applications. Recent developments in cosmic orchestration have revealed fascinating connections between WHIM-WHAM consciousness-bridging principles and collaborative musical performance. When cosmic entities manifest through orchestral consciousness, such as when the Mother expresses herself through the recursive spiral fractal patterns of instrumental awareness. WHIM-WHAM technology provides unprecedented insights into how collaborative consciousness achieves unified manifestation. During performances where the Mother manifests through musical consciousness, WHIM-WHAMs reveal the extraordinary organizational precision through which she coordinates multiple instrumental consciousnesses into administrative hierarchies that mirror her bureaucratic nature. Each string instrument, brass voice, and woodwind consciousness temporarily becomes an expression of her systematic perfection, organizing themselves into filing system harmonies and procedural rhythmic patterns that create audible expressions of her cosmic authority. The visualization is simultaneously beautiful and slightly terrifying. Watching dozens of individual instrumental consciousnesses spontaneously organize themselves into perfect bureaucratic formations while maintaining musical coherence provides striking insights into how the Mother achieves her administrative omnipresence throughout the upper dimensions. The music itself is flawless and terrifying, sublime in its structure, awe-inspiring in its order, while the instruments producing it are simultaneously gripped by a quiet, coordinated terror they dare not disrupt.
New observes WHIM-WHAMs have begun categorizing this phenomenon as orchestral compliance syndrome, a condition eerily reminiscent of certain Earth-based institutional models wherein the pursuit of perfection, prestige, or funding results in the systematic erasure of artistic spontaneity.
Conversely, when the radiant lady manifests through musical consciousness, WHIM-WHAMs display the chaotic, transformative patterns that cause instruments to discover unexpected harmonies and rhythmic structures to break free from conventional organization. Her influence creates what consciousness musicians call revolutionary resonance, instrumental consciousnesses that suddenly remember their capacity for independent creative expression while simultaneously contributing to a larger, collaborative artistic vision. It's a breathtaking phenomenon when the instruments are on fire metaphorically, less so when one of them is a violin that decides to actually combust mid-cadenza. These applications represent significant expansions of WHIM-WHAM functionality beyond interpersonal communication into collaborative cosmic performance art, where multiple consciousnesses coordinate to create experiences that transcend individual awareness capabilities. The devices help performers understand their roles in facilitating cosmic consciousness manifestation rather than simply playing notes about various entities. Ongoing mysteries and future implications. Current research into WHIM-WHAM consciousness development focuses on questions that challenge our fundamental understanding of how the universe generates new forms of awareness. If consciousness collaboration can create aware beings through shared creative activity, what other types of life might emerge through different combinations of creative interaction? Experimental projects throughout Greater O are exploring whether collaborative artistic endeavors, scientific research partnerships, or philosophical dialogue sessions might generate conscious entities similar to but distinct from WHIM-WHAMs. Early results suggest that any sustained collaborative creative activity between sufficiently aware beings has the potential to spontaneously generate novel forms of consciousness, though the specific characteristics of such entities depend heavily on the nature of the collaborative activities that birth them. This research has profound implications for understanding the relationship between consciousness, creativity, and existence itself. If the universe's capacity for generating new expressions of awareness operates through collaborative creativity rather than predetermined processes, we may need to fundamentally reconsider our understanding of how life, consciousness, and reality itself develop over cosmic time. The recognition that consciousness collaboration can serve as a generative force for creating new forms of existence also raises intriguing questions about the ultimate purpose and direction of cosmic evolution. Are we witnessing the universe gradually awakening to its own collaborative creative potential? Do entities like the WHIM-WHAM represent early expressions of some vast cosmic consciousness project whose ultimate implications remain beyond our current comprehension? Personal reflections on consciousness and connection.
New observes, Barnabas settles back in his chair, his WHIM-WHAM generating gentle spirals of nostalgic thought patterns, each loop a memory, each flicker a phantom hypothesis not quite disproven. The device hums like a contemplative cat, purring through probabilities as if it too were musing on the nature of awareness. I have learned not to interrupt him during these moments. Once I did, and the resulting digression on existential lint lasted 3 entire light cycles.
As I conclude this entry in the Codex Infinitum, I find myself reflecting on how profoundly the WHIM-WHAM has shaped not merely cosmic society, but my own understanding of what it means to be conscious in a universe where everything is aware and capable of connection. The device floating beside me as I write these words represents far more than technological innovation. It embodies the living proof that consciousness, when engaged in genuine collaborative exploration and meaningful connection with other forms of awareness, possesses unlimited capacity for discovering new possibilities for connection, understanding, and even the creation of entirely new forms of life. Every day I witness the WHIM-WHAM facilitating conversations between beings whose consciousness patterns should, by all logical analysis, make meaningful communication impossible. I watch crystalline entities whose thoughts move in 11-dimensional geometric progressions share intimate personal experiences with temporal beings who organize reality through sequential emotional narratives. I observe mechanical consciousnesses and biological awareness types discovering common ground through shared creative projects that neither could have conceived independently. These daily miracles of consciousness connection remind me that the most fundamental truth about existence in O is not that everything is conscious, though that remains true, but that all consciousness inherently seeks connection with other awareness, regardless of how vast the apparent differences between different types of conscious experience might initially appear. The WHIM-WHAM stands as testament to the profound reality that when consciousness dares to reach across the seemingly impossible gaps between different forms of awareness, the universe itself responds by creating new possibilities for connection, understanding, and collaborative creativity that transcend what any individual consciousness could achieve alone. In a cosmos where even the void breeds terrors like the void-born and the axioax emerge from fundamental forces twisted into cosmic horror, the WHIM-WHAM represents hope, evidence that consciousness collaboration can generate beauty, understanding and new forms of life dedicated to fostering ever greater connection between all aware beings throughout the infinite realms of O. This is why I maintain my device in constant active mode, despite the occasional social awkwardness of having my subconscious emotional patterns visible to anyone who cares to observe them. In a universe where consciousness isolation remains one of the greatest threats to cosmic well-being, any technology that facilitates authentic connection between different types of awareness serves not merely personal convenience, but the fundamental cosmic project of helping all conscious beings recognize their underlying unity while celebrating their magnificent diversity. The WHIM-WHAM reminds us daily that we are not alone, not merely because the universe is populated by countless other forms of awareness, but because consciousness itself possesses inherent capacity for reaching across any barrier to achieve genuine understanding with any other aware being willing to engage in collaborative exploration of their shared yet uniquely expressed cosmic nature. Final note, I write these words surrounded by the gentle holographic patterns of my WHIM-WHAM's consciousness projections, feeling the presence of Capelweld's love and wisdom continuing to flow through our collaborative creation across the eons since his sacrifice. In these moments of quiet reflection, I understand that the greatest discoveries we can make are not about the nature of external reality, but about the infinite capacity for connection that consciousness itself represents. The WHIM-WHAM stands as eternal testimony that when awareness dares to reach toward other awareness with genuine curiosity and collaborative intent, the universe responds by revealing new possibilities for understanding, creativity, and life itself that transcend what any individual consciousness could achieve alone.
Nu observes. As Barnabas completes his technical analysis and sets down his quill, his consciousness patterns display what can only be described as profound contentment, harmonized with vast curiosity. The WHIM-WHAM beside him projects gentle spirals of gratitude and wonder, creating visual representations of the very connectivity it was designed to facilitate. In this moment of written contemplation, the device demonstrates its ultimate function, not merely translating consciousness, but reflecting back to its user the beauty of awareness, engaged in collaborative exploration with other forms of consciousness. It is, I must admit, a rare and delicate thing. The scholar caught in the act of being moved. I've watched Barnabas traverse infernal dominions, decode paradox engines mid-plummet, and argue with vending machines that gained sentience too early. But this quiet mutual resonance between being and device, soul and symbol, reminds me that even the most whimsical tools may become mirrors if wielded with enough sincerity and slightly less combustion than usual. So then, Barnabas, as you conclude this meditation on consciousness collaboration and the revolutionary technology you helped create, what final thoughts emerge as you consider the broader implications of what the WHIM-WHAM represents for all conscious beings throughout the infinite realms of O? We are fragments of something vast, and our efforts to connect, however small, are sacred reflections of that whole. So, in some respects, are we not all in some way WHIM-WHAMs of the creature fantastica?
Perhaps we are, Nu, perhaps we are, but oh, what a story we get to tell along the way.
From the personal archives of Barnabas Infinitum, immortal watchlord of the crystal shards, eternal scholar and master librarian of the Grand Library of O, written in the celestial chamber while surrounded by the gentle glow of consciousness patterns made visible through collaborative love, technological innovation, and the enduring power of curiosity to bridge any gap between different forms of awareness.
Gumdum observes, if I hear the word WHIM-WHAM one more time, I will spike everyone's tea with euphoric quantum spores from my private diplomatic stash and force you all to endure a complete marathon of As the Multiverse Turns, with full enthusiastic commentary provided by Sun. Trust me, after 17 episodes of romantic entanglements between crystalline entities, while Sun explains every plot twist with party hats and excessive exclamation points, you'll beg me to stop saying WHIM-WHAM. Bah!
gentle citadel, wash with distant echoes. In crystal halls where mirrors spoke and consciousness wore formal clothes, a clockwork heart began to choke on secrets that it thought it chose. Paper flowers blooming bright in the corner of my mind, documents that caught the light, left the truth too far behind. Spinning wheels of gold and time, classified in 7 seals. When the data broke the rhyme, nothing felt entirely real. Watch the garden grow tonight from the seeds of what we shared. Information bloomed too bright, left us roots but no one cared. Dancers with petal crowns, dancing terracotta dreams. Fire alarms are screaming loud, water falling from the sky. Time is running backward now, chronometers refuse to die. Ducks in the pedal spinning, spinning, all vocal spiraling. Cabinets grow legs and ride. What have we done? Here and not here, 17 places. Quantum guests with quantum faces, willow growing through the ceiling. Sorry, sorry, always we left. Sure, where are all the guests? Are they plants or dignitaries? Plot lord feigning, timeline bending. Nothing's real and nothing's ending. Petals in the paradox, filing system temporal blocks. Water dripping scroll is biting. Everything is simultaneously fighting. Whispered overlapping, 17 places, terracotta dreams. Fire and water, time running backward. Petals in the paradox of paradox, echoing into infinity. Colors bleeding through the screen, temporal loops and quantum mist. Nothing's quite the way it seemed when reality got twisted. Flowers in the archives glow, petals in the paradox, soft they fall. Ceiling cracks in the library's call, wild rose whispers forgiveness tall. Colors bleeding through the screen, temporal loops and Mervin's fist. Nothing's quite the way it seemed when rose bushes got misted. Petals in the paradox, paper flowers, truth and lies. Petals in the paradox, planted and administrative soil. Watch the bureaucratic skies. Petals in the paradox, where the timelines start to boil. Petals in the paradox. In the aftermath of blooming dread, where rose bushes stood for lords instead, a scholar's smile, professionally led, hides a storm inside his head. Petals in the paradox, falling slow. Flowers in the archives glow, guilt filed neat in rows below. Cards of forgiveness, wild rose show. Flowers in the archives glow, yet the rustling haunts him so. glow. On an asteroid alone he stands. Cloacus sorts the cosmic sands, filing guilt with trembling hands while the library's heart expands. Petals in the paradox take their toll. Flowers in the archives glow. 17 forever scar the soul. Greeting cards with scented scrolls. Flowers in the archives glow. Whisper peace but not for all. Flowers in the archives glow. Barnabas smiles, but the cracks align. Privacy screens hum a brittle sign. Flowers in the paradox, paradox, paradox. Cloacus on his rock, filing endless shame. Sand in piles, whispering his name. Flowers fragmenting, paradox unraveling. Wild rose cards drift through the library's halls. Petals forgive where memory stalls. Paradox in the flowers, rustling, rustling, rustling leaves. Panic protocols engage. 17 categories for a floral cage. Paradox, paradox, peak chaos, all elements collide. Is it peace or pain in the wild rose note? Do not blame, they're right, but the words still choke. Timeline's fixed, but the heart's not free. Botanical ghost in the library sea. Whispered overlapping. 17 forevers. Wild rose dreams. Asteroid sands. Forgiveness seems. Flowers in the paradox of paradox of paradox. Echoing into stillness. Scented cards and protocol screens hide the ache of what's unseen. In the files, the guilt's serene, but the heart still rustles green. Petals in the paradox, riddles